insurance, and sort of like a roadside attraction. So.
Is a building shaped like a cat?
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
It's kind of like shingle wood butcher style, kind of.
Cool.
So yeah, so that was the big kind of, and so we just had like a Halloween party there. Just
oh wow.
Just kind of like winter. There's books and people sitting. Somebody brought me a petrified cat to stick in there that they found under a house and.
Petrified.
Well, it's
mummified.
Mummified, yeah. It's like it's kind of flat.
It's getting petrified. Wow.
The stone.
I don't know. Yeah, because like the kid, I was talking to the kid, but he thought it was just like leak hole or something. But I was like, no, the skin's all still on there. It's like
okay, man, you gotta be quiet.
Before we start, tell us what you've been up to.
Oh, what have I been up to? Okay, well, we went on this big tour this summer, like visiting all different kinds of people for this book, which is the Tales from the Sustainable Underground. So the idea is we're profiling people who, had kind of just through their belief in sustainability had done something and kind of butted up against the law, and how that can oftentimes have it can go either way.
Devastating consequences.
It can have either devastating,
catastrophic consequences,
catastrophic or beneficial, depending on how the interaction with the law turns out, as it were. So we visited a bunch of like natural builders like Sunray Kelly, and these guy on the West Coast, and a bunch of solar people out in Colorado and California, and some weed growers, and just all different kinds of people.
Wow.
So so I was definitely interested in getting a history of y'all's exploits in Austin. Not that you have to go into great detail, but the general outline of how that got started and everything that you had going on there, and then how that came to pass, and then moving up here and starting over more kind of above board. Because to me, that was going to make a really great end chapter to it, where it's gone all the way from just going out and doing it, and then learning to kind of work more, trying to change the laws, as it were, and work within the system.
Yeah.
So you guys have a very unique perspective that I think will work great.
Yeah, we've gone through it and sort of come out 180. And, I'll sort of twist on things. Yeah.
So how did tell me about getting started up in Austin, like the piece of property that you guys had down there, and your relationship to it, and how that happened.
Do you want to start? I'm going to start.
Scotty, Scotty got a warehouse he got an inheritance and bought a warehouse and kind of opened it up and said, this is my dream, and kind of wrote a beginning document calling people to do activist, and you can say that better.
Yeah, had to sort of initially all created. It was sort of coming out of the global justice movement, which was peaking around that period, around 1999, 2000, and the thing we were talking a lot about was another world is possible was a catchphrase that you heard pretty commonly during that time, and so we wanted to develop a model of what that might actually look like. Something that a number of people have been talking about with a number of people for quite some period of time, to be able to settle down in one place and allow community organizations, activist groups to work out of the space and not have to worry so much about making rent, just be able to get to work on what it was that they were doing, to provide what we call this Center for Community Organizing, while at the same time doing what we call a demonstration of urban sustainability and having displays of ecological tools and technologies for the public to come in. The idea was to have this all under the same roof and do some cross-pollination to sort of demonstrate how the connections between social justice and environmental sustainability movements were clear. How there was an inherent connection between them. And like Stacey was saying, we began initially by sort of putting out the call and saying people can come here and be part of the space and try and make their dreams happen here.
And so, did you get a lot of responses at first, or?
Yeah, it took years for it to kind of settle out into a workable space.
The first year was pretty turbulent, I would say.
Yeah.
By the second year, I think we begin to really try and develop some structure.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me exactly where it was in Austin.
East Austin,
Mm-hmm.
sort of the industrial corridor of the city.
North of the river, or?
Yep.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, north of the river. Yeah.
East of I-35.
Yeah. 5th and Pleasant Valley. I don't know if you know Austin at all, but kind of right on the eastern border of the city, pretty close to where the city ends and where it turns into cattle farms after that. But still within Austin.
So when you say it was tumultuous, that means that you got a lot of response, but it was unorganized, or how do you mean?
Well, there was different people wanting different things. So.
And how were you politically organized, or was that part of the tumult?
It took a while to come. I mean, it was a collective, but it took a while to really come into shape, and it kept changing through the whole time. It was always a fluid thing. Or a very loosely organized thing. So that would be something that if I could go back and start everything over, it would be much more structured.
From the
beginning, with everybody with roles being defined and responsibilities being defined and
bylaws and
I don't know bylaws, but just really what the roles and responsibilities are of being a part of it, and what. I mean that.
Yeah.
Because that there was a lot of stress and it meant different things to different people.
Did a lot of that responsibility fall on you guys to keep it going and deal with disputes and things like that?
I think Stacy ended up sort of taking on almost the enforcer role of decisions that were collectively made, and took a lot of flack for that, which was just really unfortunate. And I think that's sort of a common thing that you see in a lot of collective projects, is that there ends up being one person who is actually forcing these decisions that everybody made, and then they get labeled the jerk or whatever, which is just there are a lot nastier words used than that, I'm sure, but that's one unfortunate aspect of it. I mean, I think in the first year, and that's in retrospect a mistake I made, was just by kind of putting this call out there. And I mean, in an ideal situation, it would have been done so much differently, where you had a core group of people with a clear vision going in, clearly stated about how organizational structure was going to be set up, and addressing issues of ownership from the onset.
Ownership of the space?
Ownership of the space, and if it's to be a genuinely collective process and project, I believe that that ownership does need to be ultimately shared, and it may not be feasible in all instances to do that from the onset, because I mean, real estate is tricky. It's difficult for a group of people to necessarily pull all the resources together and purchase property. I mean, it can happen. Sometimes it happens that you have one or more individuals initially with the largest amount of capital, but then it needs to be, I think, almost institutionalized. It needs to be figured out how that's going to get paid back, so that ownership ultimately is shared among all the members of the collective, if it is to be a genuine collective. That's, I mean, it doesn't, I'm not saying an absolutist about it anyway. I don't think it necessarily have to be. I mean, any number of possible organizational structures are valid. Just if it's to be called a collective, I think that's important, and that's one thing that we didn't.
An ownership
and that's one thing that we didn't do. We sort of left it open and said, well, yes, we want the collective to eventually buy the space back from us, but we said we're not gonna force it. We want that initiative to come from the collective itself, and that basically never happened. And by the time it really did, at the end, it was kind of too late. Like the most of the energy and the momentum for that had already from the people who were real potential core members who might have actually have gone along with that had already just sort of
dissipated,
just dispersed, and that energy was gone. But yeah, I mean, that first year, what we sort of called the circus years, where there was, a literal
so
circus.
Tell me about some of the people that were moving in there and what was happening, what were they doing?
Circus freaks, gutter punks, some great people also.
There was a lot of people living there, or
And some of those people were great people.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people living there. There wasn't really rooms. Like, there wasn't a lot of private room space.
how big a space was it roughly?
It was
9,400 square feet. Only a third of that was residential, though.
The rest was just big spaces. So then people would carve out little areas, and it took a while to.
And was there outside space as well, or
A little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah, a courtyard.
But over the years, the people, they were definitely turned. Most of the people there had a more activist bent, and we built.
So were there some more legitimate kind of political or other community groups that were there at the beginning, or?
Not at the beginning, but
Not at the
over
very
time.
beginning, but in the first couple of years, we did manage to draw them in. Bias Across Borders, Independent Media, Food Not Bombs, Inside Books.
And but also over time, we built the second story. Well, the roof was leaking, so we'd wake up in the middle of the night and there'd be rain dumping in on everything. So we built.
Were you guys living in the space, or
Yeah.
you were? Okay.
Yeah.
And so we built a second story on it that had rooms that were, decent rooms for people to live in.
And what did you build them out of? Just.
They were pretty.
A lot of salvage
Yeah, it was
materials.
mostly.
Dumpster dive,
salvage
2x4s, and
And
But-
so were any authorities at all aware that anyone was living there, or that you were building onto it, or anything like that?
We had a certificate of occupancy.
yeah, that we actually did go through a legalizing process at the very beginning,
Right.
where we had to get,
where it could actually be residential, or
yes.
just, yeah.
Well, this is the way we
The
set it
one
up.
building.
Yeah, we got a use change on the space and had it designated as Arts and Crafts Limited and plus an accessory dwelling unit. And there was legally only supposed to be one person living there, although it was phrased in this general way that there could be an unspecified number of guests. It was very unclear, but it seemed to satisfy people at the coast department, so
You just let it go.
we just let it go, and it never
And
was an
codes
issue
would
for
come through
years.
every now and
Almost twice a year, quite
they would
regularly.
come through because of the chickens or something, and we'd always be nice and give a box of food, or whatever, and it just worked. And here, meanwhile, we were building a second story without any permits.
Well, that first year also, remember when we were away, the coast department came and they just cited a whole bunch of stuff and that had to be done, work that had to be done.
That
in
was
the
to get
building.
the original CO.
No, we had that CO before that, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Getting that CO was one of the first things I did for the space.
I thought that took the
No, that only took the first.
All right. Well, we don't
Yeah,
talk
couple
about
months.
it.
Yeah.
But so things were fine and things, things developed and we built this second story that made it so that people who like to have a room with 4 walls and a window could live in.
So what's the
And one that stayed
approximate?
dry.
And dry.
So approximately how many rooms and people were living there once you were done?
I don't know, like 10 to 12 people.
We would, in the winters, we would peak out around 14.
Yeah, because people come down.
There was a huge amount of seasonal variation. In the winters we go up around 14, and in the summers sometimes as little 3
Yeah.
people would be there, which
Which
was
was
a real
really
problem.
hard on them.
Yeah, really tough for the people who stay behind. But it just gets so hot in the summer. A lot of people would want to take off, myself included. But yeah, that first year was definitely sort of a weeding out process of getting people who were really going to be on board with the vision of the space and its mission and purpose, and for one, us really getting that clearly defined, but then people who weren't really down with that, it became apparent and they left when it was clear that this wasn't going to be a space that they could just come and float in and make a mess.
Or it wasn't just the cool warehouse.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
So,
just to be cool.
how were you dividing the responsibilities of just like maintaining the space and keeping it clean? And
oh God, how many different chore wheels were made, you know?
Yeah.
But
Right.
no, it wasn't. The meetings, every meeting.
Did you have regular meetings?
We had regular meetings, and dishes were frequently a topic. You know, I mean, just like any group living situation,
Sure.
it was all there. We didn't really master any of those problems.
Right.
Well, at the very beginning, we didn't make a distinction between the space, the organization, and the private residence space. It was. I mean, it was a distinction in space, but not in the meetings. Like the house meetings and the Rhizome meetings were the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
it didn't lead to people wanting to be a part
Yeah.
of.
Okay, so you pretty much kind of had to be living there to be a part of it. Almost,
No. But
No,
you
but
didn't.
you
You
had
wouldn't want to
To
come.
really feel a part of it,
Yeah.
you had to be living there.
Yeah.
And I think that alienated a lot of people.
People who came to meetings interested in what the group was and had to sit and listen to us argue about dishes for an hour. It's like, who wants to do
it's
that?
not gonna, and then
It's
we
ridiculous.
tried to kind of break up the same meeting. But anyway, what we finally ended up doing years into it was breaking up and having two different meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And so one meeting was just the house, and the other meeting was the Rhizome Collective organization, and which included the backspace where the different groups operated out of.
Yeah.
And so then the groups operating had to send a representative to that meeting. And so that really, and the groups operating had more of a responsibility to caretake the entire space than before.
Mm-hmm.
So that helped really clarify and turn it more into it gave the groups operating a lot more feeling of ownership,
responsibility,
right?
And the house
Which
became
they
a sub-collective.
Became a part of to
Yeah.
fulfilled to different degrees. I mean, but yeah. So that changed the organization of things.
Mm-hmm.
But it also created the issue that the house sort of became a sub-collective, just like any of the other groups that were working out of there. So then it got to this point where we had people living in the house who weren't necessarily part of or interested even in Rhizome, or being part of it, and you just had... We had some people who were really just renters, who were just living there, paying their rent. I mean, the rent... All the rent went to paying for taxes, utilities, insurance, and then what was surplus used...
Well, the surplus
what
was
did
used
the
to
Rhizome
operate,
pool, yeah.
Rhizome things.
And effectively
So
be
it
subsidizing the rent of the activist organizations that were working out of there.
So tell me some of the Rhizome things. Like, what all were you guys experimenting with, and what were you successful at there, and what was more, didn't work out so well?
Like what do you mean?
What were you guys doing? I mean, what was Rhizome doing? What were you guys up to?
Mostly just keeping the space open. Keeping the space open, doing maintenance on the space.
Well, then there was your whole urban...
Yeah, there was a
demonstration
sustainability project, right.
For urban sustainability.
Okay, tell me about that.
Which was, I think, one of the things that made Rhizome so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that's what made it distinct from just any other activist space, was that it had this, that it was a functioning model of urban sustainability and urban permaculture systems.
I mean, these are a lot of things that y'all go into in the toolbox.
Yeah, I mean, the book Toolbox for Sustainability Living is a document.
Talk about them just for a minute.
Yeah. Well, we had, when we first got there, it was just a big asphalt parking lot. The buildings were in disrepair, and just a big asphalt parking lot. And we came in and tore up the asphalt and created extensive and lush gardens in this courtyard space in the middle. Planted all kinds of fruit trees. Imported just a huge amount of waste materials to break down and turn into soil. We built rainwater collection systems, constructed wetlands for grey water filtration, ponds, a number of different solar systems, passive solar and active solar
This was all in
systems.
this courtyard area that you're
Yeah.
talking about? And how big
Yeah,
was
we
the
kind
space?
of encroached on the two fields.
Okay, that were just
Yeah.
empty next to you.
Yeah, we had two 2-acre vacant lots on either
Okay.
side of us that we...
Which was a really unique situation.
Yeah, yeah. You don't see that anywhere in northern cities, but yeah, we definitely encroached on those areas. We were land squatting them. The courtyard was about 1/3 of an acre. We built a greenhouse with an aquaculture system. We have wind turbines, chickens, turkeys, ducks, all
You
sorts
had
of...
wind turbines generating electricity?
I mean...
Tiny bits.
Tiny bits of electricity. It was more for educational purposes.
Yeah.
A light bulb would flicker.
Yeah. What else do we have?
You had
Straw
all the,
bale,
like, mushroom stuff
demonstrations.
going on.
Yeah, mushroom cultivation.
So what about the bioremediation? I mean, you guys were trying to... Was there? I thought I read, you know, that you were doing some ecological remediation there.
Well, probably the brownfield property.
Okay, that's not...
Yeah, that was in 2004. I made a call to the Austin Brownfield Tree Development Office, just curious as to what they did, and they mentioned that they had this 10-acre piece of land that they were looking to give away to, or the owner was at least interested in giving it away to a nonprofit organization.
Mm-hmm.
Wow! So we went and looked at it, and it was this 10-acre piece of land, actually, kind of right across the river from us,
Mm-hmm.
pretty close just on the south side of the river. That 10-acre piece of land that bordered a 350-acre park.
Mm-hmm.
It's still within city limits. It's pretty incredible. So this contiguous 360 acres is just a gem, you know, in the middle of the city. But this 10-acre parcel had been used as an illegal dump for about 15 years. So there was just mountains, literal entire hillside of trash.
Mm-hmm.
This like contractor debris, just crazy mix of concrete chunks with rebar twisted all through it, and wood scraps, tires, carpet, just all kinds of insane amounts of garbage. You know, at first we looked at it and we're like, wow, it's kind of overwhelming. And it was about the same time we came across the...
No, the city office gave us the women from
Did
the
they? Oh, they
office,
turned us on to that grant?
They said that there's a grant you can get to clean it from the EPA, and so they gave us that grant application. What time is it?
Quarter of. Still too bad.
So
You guys need to go right at 3 or...
We just need to get
I
Ellie
just-
from school.
yeah.
Okay.
I can come over. So instead of going to the big protest in Miami, I stayed home and wrote the grant.
Right. And what happened?
And we got it.
Yeah.
We were surprised. Very surprised.
Right.
Well, we had decided though that we would.
We decided we were going to go ahead and do it.
and go after the land no matter what.
Uh-huh.
And we said, well, if it takes us 10 years to clean it up, then so
Right.
be it. We'll do it on our
So
own.
Scotty kind of orchestrated the donation to the Rhizome Collective of the land.
Yeah.
So that happened, that transfer.
happened.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So the owner was, donated it to us and turned out a tax write-off.
I mean, with the stipulation that it had to be cleaned up.
No,
Or no?
he didn't care.
He didn't care.
He didn't care.
He didn't
just
care.
didn't
But
want
we had it as a memorandum of understanding in the grant that if we did get the grant, that he would donate the land to us.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But anyway,
So you got it.
But
Yeah.
we got it. We got the grant. We got the land, and so we did that. That was a 2-year. It was a 2-year grant.
basically paid ourselves and our friends for 2 years to
Right. Bought a lot of neat toys.
had members do a lot of hired them to do community outreach, go around in the neighborhoods and talk about what it is we were doing there and what we intended.
And how were you developing kind of a plan for the site? Were you just coming up with something on your own, or were you like talking to the rest of the community around there? Or?
Both.
Uh-huh.
Right. We wanted to make it an environmental educational park,
Uh-huh.
and then also what else? I mean, and really we just envisioned that as green space with like a trail with maybe some kiosks or something, you know. And then we went around and asked people in the conversations what they would like to see, the neighbors in that.
You were having some kind of charrettes or something, or just talking.
Yeah, we
casually
tried.
with
We
people,
tried. We
or-
had community meetings and nobody
Uh-huh.
came.
Potlucks.
We had potlucks. We had barbecues.
Uh-huh.
And it was a kind of secluded down. You know, it was
Not an obvious community around it.
right.
Uh-huh.
So that didn't. You know, it wasn't like there was like a big strong group of people that were like, we really want
We want to be
an
part of
open
it.
air theater. Or
I think- I mean,
whatever it is.
Most
Like,
people just seemed psyched that something
right.
positive was going to happen. You know, that it would be more than just a dump.
Right. So we cleaned it up. And,
So you spent 2 years cleaning it up.
Yeah, and the idea was instead of hauling all that trash to a landfill somewhere else, we would try and reuse as much of it as we could to build infrastructure for this park.
Meanwhile, during these 2 years, there's still a lot of stuff going on over the warehouse.
Oh,
Yeah.
Nothing stopped at the warehouse.
Yeah.
That was from 2004 to 2006. Well, I guess that was probably like the peak of the Rhizome, I would say, right about then.
Those were busy times.
Yes,
Yeah.
they were.
What about the conception for the book? Did that happen during this time, or was that something a year or two later? Or
We've been talking about writing a book.
We started.
Yeah,
we started early. Like it's funny to look back at the earliest drafts of some of the sections.
Yeah. Terrible.
Right.
We had to learn how to write. You know?
Yeah.
But
had to figure out what it was. I mean, and that was a fun process. I mean, that's sort of. I think a lot of the text for the book was being developed simultaneously with curriculum for Rust and for the workshops, and the two complemented it and sort of co-evolved with each other.
in fact, the original name for the book that Scotty was putting it under was the Rust Manual.
Rust Manual, yeah.
Rust standing for
Radical Urban Sustainability Training.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was this process of figuring out, well, how do we break this information down simply and logically where it makes sense to people, and that was an interesting process to go through, and drawing from all the experimentation that we had done over this period of time.
But we started working on it during that time.
Yeah, we started pretty early and went through a lot of drafts, and it just was always getting deprioritized, and it wasn't until much later that we realized that we didn't have to submit a completed manuscript to a publisher, that we could just give them a sample chapter, which was much more doable than the idea of completing an entire manuscript without an advance of deadline. But,
so after 2 years of cleaning up the site, you kind of develop some ideas of what that's going to look like, and then what happens?
At the site or in general?
At the 10-acre spot.
The 10-acre spot, someone was...
Is it cleaned up now, pretty much?
Oh yeah, we finished the complete up. We were one of the few, and it was interesting, one of the few grant recipients that actually completed the work. And we were surprised by that.
But I think we never submitted we didn't submit pictures, so we didn't get to go in for an award.
Well, yeah, but we got the certificate of completion from the State Environmental Board. This City of Austin gave us the Best of the Best award.
It wasn't the City of Austin.
I mean, not the City of Austin. Keep Austin Beautiful. Best of the Best award.
So what did you do with all the stuff that was there? You had to take a lot of it to the dump, I imagine.
What did the stuff that was genuinely trash that didn't have any potential to be recycled. There was a lot of metal rebar that we cut up, and what was sellable we sold for scrap and actually made some money back on it. Other stuff just got taken to metal recycling. Wood, we rented a big chipper shredder and sent it through there and chopped it up to make mulch for trails. Concrete, a lot of concrete chunks that we used. We created a pretty large raised garden bed down there.
Oh, Rust Work Traders.
Yeah, Rust Work Traders. Yeah. That was good. A lot of glass and bottles or something.
Right.
Yeah, we used it.
Floating trash island.
Yeah, we built a floating trash island out of plastic bottles. We used them. Cleaning it up was crazy. We just had a tractor and would sort of hook chains around this crazy mass and try and pull it down, and then send people up with oxyacetylene torches to sort of cut the rebar away from the concrete and then just get out of the way as it fell. It was a pretty crazy process, but yeah, we managed to do it. And, cleaned up this whole hillside.
Awesome.
I mean, I can bring you up to speed on where it is now.
Sure.
Pretty much after the cleanup, we didn't really. It kind of languished, you know. We did a little bit of stuff here and there. There was some, caretaker living down there, and almost right after Rhizome got cracked down on, the warehouse space, the brownfield also got cracked down on for the fact somebody's living there. We did build a composting toilet there. That's probably
the first legally permitted composting toilet in the city of Austin.
And what variety of composting toilet was it?
Sort of just a passive design with a twin vault system. It's a pretty colossal structure, actually. 2 seats, big concrete vault underneath. That, one side would fill up and then we'd close it and then fill together, and it would sit for 2 years and then it would just turn into soil. But it's pretty much a 6-year process of me and my friend Lauren Ross, who's an environmental engineer, of trying to get a code-approved composting toilet.
Right.
And we finally managed to do that. We had to convince the state, had to convince the city, and they finally okayed it, and we constructed it, and we.
Dave constructed.
Dave, yeah. Well, and that was one thing that we used a fair amount of Rhizome money for, actually. But yeah, we got national press. That was the only thing we ever got national press for.
The composting.
Yeah, we got an article in Time magazine about that
really?
composting toilet. Yeah, there's a picture of Dave standing next to it.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
And so now it got cracked down on for someone living there.
Yeah.
For someone living there, the toilet was okay.
So what kind of structure were they living in?
They had built a little shack.
Shack.
And there was an old trailer that got moved there.
Yeah, I mean, we had to have somebody living there because there was just constant vandalism. Just like bored kids going down there and stealing stuff, breaking stuff. But then that got shut down, and we've just learned, I guess, that that Rhizome, as it exists on paper, or at least as a legal entity, has sold it to Ecology Action, which is a recycling cooperative. Worker run. Yeah,
okay.
Out of Austin, and what they want to do is actually pretty close to our original ideas of
they're doing a big
composting operation, which is one thing that we thought made a lot of sense for it.
Yeah.
Having like a small scale composting operation down there. So they're actually going ahead with that, and they actually have income to structure to make it happen. So that's exciting, that's good.
So the Rhizome Collective still exists as a legal entity?
As a legal entity.
Yeah.
And right now I think they're trying to fundraise to get a new space.
Uh-huh. And you guys are no longer a part of that?
Well, no, we came back up.
Yeah.
We moved permanently up here.
Right, and
So
legally disassociated yourself.
We never were on the board anyway. Were you ever?
It was the original president.
Yeah.
I incorporated him. Did all the
They have elections and all that kind of stuff, bylaws, or no?
Yeah.
I mean, to be a legal entity, don't you have to?
It's a nonprofit corporation.
Yeah.
And I got the 501c3 and filed all the paperwork and kept all the paperwork on that. So there's, the structure is there. That's a lot of work.
There's a lot
done. We weren't. I got off the board when we got the grant so that I could be an employee. And Scotty was never on the board because he was the owner of the building.
Yeah, we had it set up so that we had a for-profit corporation that actually owned the building and then would lease it to the nonprofit. That's how we were set up like that.
But it was leased at no profit. It wasn't the money that was paid on that lease covered the taxes.
That TICAM stuff, or whatever you want to call it, like taxes, insurance, whatever that stands for, or whatever.
Yeah. Or almost covered that. But then so in our lives personally, in 2006, I got pregnant in 2005, and so after we had been coming up here for a couple months in the summer, up until then, and then once we had our first daughter, we started staying up here more and going down there a couple months in the winter. At first it was like 5 months, and then it slowly got less and less.
Right.
And so we were starting to pull back away, and our priority, like where we were at in our personal lives, was changing.
Right.
The family was up here.
Our families are up here. We're from, so it just. We were going through that transition, and Rhizome was going through its own transition in our absence. We were the ones we were the only ones still there who had started it.
So what was
living in the house? People living in the house. Most of them came in. The people who moved in during that time. That were there at the very end. So that made for a different dynamic then.
And us taking a step back may have been necessary for the brief period of time that Rhizome may have sort of come into its own. And
Been
was able to
not about you guys,
right? Yeah,
but more of
yeah.
an independent organization that's
right.
self-sustaining.
Right, because I mean, as much as we tried to make it a collective and egalitarian structure, I mean, the ownership dynamic is always present. I mean, and that's huge,
And so is being the ones there for the longest.
Yeah.
That's, with or without ownership, like being the ones who have the most time invested.
Members,
right. And that's gonna,
And I guess in retrospect, it's that's there, and I think we were sort of trying to pretend.
Well, I don't know.
like
That's not true. We
I don't know.
talked about it.
Yeah, we would talk about it.
Oh, we
but,
did meetings upon meetings.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it was almost like hierarchy was just a very dirty word, versus now where I'd be like, well, it's not necessarily good or bad, I mean, just call it for what it is,
and just have to address it, basically.
Just let it be transparent, I guess. Which, I mean, I guess it was.
It just wasn't.
It was challenging. It's always challenging.
It's always challenging. And again, going back, I would just, if for anyone starting anything like that, I would just say, make sure what the responsibilities and expected responsibilities are of everyone in the group, that's very clear. I mean, I tried writing them up, hanging them on the wall, whatever. But just make sure that there has to be...
Well, there has to be a political process, and there has to be rules by which you can negotiate and settle disagreements with.
An understanding. So,
which we had, and even then you're going to always have people that
it's on the
just
wall,
choose to ignore it, and then later down the road are going to get pissed off when they realize that things are a certain way, and they just haven't bothered to pay attention
to
before.
read the notes or
look
in the book of whatever agreements or I don't know.
Yeah.
But so what happened? Then we were down there.
Well, sort of, around that time,
that.
also before we, as we're transitioning. Okay, I can.
Yeah.
Should I keep talking while you're going?
No.
Okay. Well, I can talk about certain things, and then you can come back and give your feedback.
Or do you want to be gone for like 10 minutes, right?
5.
Okay.
I'll be right back. I'm just gonna go get out.
Keep
I'm gonna go
talking.
get out.
Okay.
I'll be right back. I'll be right back. It's alright.
Uh-oh.
No, we may not be able to.
Yeah. We'll take a little break.